Okay, good evening, everyone. You're welcome once again to this webinar series, as we usually do. And today is another very special edition. We've got a fantastic guest in our midst tonight. And it's a continuation of, this is what we do all the time in terms of trying to basically examine things in the polity, in our country, and all around, just to try to provide solutions to examine the different aspects of issues that affect the national life of the African continents, the countries that make up the African continents, the communities that make up the African continent. And tonight we're going to be treating a topic that is very, very close to my heart, and one that is very, very tangential to the future survival of the African continent, so to say, and that is, and we've got a fantastic speaker to help us examine this topic in all its ramification in every way, just so that we can. And incidentally, this is the first time we're having a speaker from that part of Africa, all the way from towards Southern Africa there, and I'm very excited today. Someone that, our paths crossed by someone is sharing their screen who is not supposed to share it. Can you? Someone, so basically it's a fantastic one, and I'm very, very excited, like I said. Tonight, it is my pleasure to welcome into our midst a very, very I'll say very cerebral individual, someone I know who has a very rich knowledge of quite a lot of diverse issues that impact on so many areas. So if you're talking politics, if you're talking religious, if you're talking educational, if you're talking it is my pleasure to. So let me first of all read his bio. He is a leadership training and empowerment specialist who was formerly a lecturer at the International University of Management in Windhoek, Namibia. That's the university itself was founded by Namibia, a former Minister of Education of Namibia. That's Dr. David Richard Namwandi. This speaker of ours holds a BSc in management, as well as an MBA, and currently serves, he holds a BCom degree in management, as well as an MBA, and currently serves as managing director at Mago Training and Technology, which is also based in Namibia. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome into our midst tonight, Mr. Forward Makwavarara. I do hope that I actually described that very correctly. I think you're muted. So.
Thank you, Mr. Convener. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure having you with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And tonight, for our guests, we just for Mr. Some of our guests, speakers who have come in and out regularly. By now, they know the drill. They know what we do. But just the modus operandi of this. Of course, we've got the social media audience who will be participating in this in one way or the other. And in addition to the social media audience, so we'll be taking questions at some point from social media. But in addition to that, we have an in-house panel as well, usually made up of anywhere up to, at times it could be up to 25 people, but usually, at times it could be 10, it could be 15. And then they will be also posing questions towards the last 30 minutes of last 45 minutes of the webinar. So for the topic for today is a continuation of our thematic transformational series. And today we are examining the road to African Renaissance in the light of the socio-political, economic challenges and the realities of globalization. Of course, it goes without saying that when we talk about African Renaissance, it is something that is very, 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 very close to a lot of people's hearts in terms of, how can we get Africa back to where it's supposed to be, and of course we talk about this belief, this assurance, that Africa would overcome all the challenges, the road, the landmines in its path to, to rediscovering its glory, and so it is one of it is something that's over the years, many academics, many people in the academic field have had a look at. There have been so many theories, there have been so many postulations regarding this, but still, despite everything, we are still where we are, and people begin to ask the question: is there really a hope somewhere for Africa? Is there hope on the horizon? Is there, we say after every dark night, behind every dark cloud is a silver lining, so is there a silver lining? We say after every night of darkness, there's a glorious dawn. Is there a glorious dawn for Africa? Because when we look around, we see, in fact, now we're seeing the re-emergence of military dictatorship. The military are beginning to take over in so many places. Many nations are selling their souls for a morsel of porridge, in terms of wars and everything here and there. Things, I can see Stephen Kendamola raised the hand already. We've not even started the topic. The person is already raising their hands. So don't worry, when we will recognize you when we start taking questions at some point and contributions there and there. So just keep your hand raised there. So we need to get our speaker started. Time is of the essence. So when we talk about African Renaissance, just so that we don't assume that everybody understands the nitty-gritty of this. So when we talk of African Renaissance, Mr. Forward, what are we actually referring to?
Thank you, Mr. Convener. African Renaissance. So there are a number of aspects that you need to look at when you talk about African Renaissance. As an ideological framework, we would then look at the roots of African Renaissance in Pan-Africanism, but perhaps a quick working definition. A Renaissance is a rebirth. Now, if you are talking about a rebirth, it means you have already been born, but you need to be born again. Now, the question that comes to my mind then is, was Africa born? Were we having any glory that would say we want to restore that glory? What are we trying to go back to? What defines our Africanism? So I would find then the roots of the Renaissance, the rebirth, in another ideological framework of Pan-Africanism. Now, when you talk Pan-Africanism, you are basically talking about where we have come from, the solidarity that drove the wars of liberation. The realization that as Africa, we are oppressed. Now, if we are oppressed, we need to redefine our circumstances. We cannot continue to be in these circumstances. Now, with independence, obviously, we cannot remain in the same place we have been given rulership right? Political self-determination. But do we sit and say, we are done because we have had a revolution? The revolution was good, but now is perhaps time for evolution. But are we in an environment to evolve, or we still need further revolution? So for me, African Renaissance is saying Africa has got a history that it can be proud of. Now, when I say Africa, I'm just not talking about the black skin. No, that's not my kind of Africa. What makes Africa, for me, is the heart, the inner person, the pride, not just in being black, but also in the mindset. I am an African, I stand for something. And that's what I would want us perhaps to talk about, to revive, have a renaissance, a rebirth of African pride, reclaim our past glory. Thank you, Mr. Bonavin. You are mute, Mr. Bonavin.
Oh, thank you so much. This happens to me all the time, you know, and people have to say, you know what, you're muted. You know, thank you so much for, I like the way you've broken that, and now you've introduced a different thing, you know. And so for me, I want you to actually go a bit deeper, proud to actually going fully into the topic in terms of the primary definition, you know, primary a methodological analysis of, you know, the angle you have taken this to in terms of, you know what, you're not defining this by virtue of the color of the skin. You're not defining this in terms of, you know, where I come from. Do you get what I'm saying? Now, so that it's clearer for each and every one of us to understand, can you let us a bit more into this in terms of really what made you decide on this new idea of it, rather than, you know, where I come from, the color of my skin and everything? What makes me, what is that Africanism, the new Africanism, quote and unquote, that you're introducing into this topic?
Perhaps I should start with a confession. It is not really a new idea.
Okay.
There is nothing new about being an African who is proud to be African. That is why it is a renaissance. If it was a new idea, then it would not be a renaissance. We wouldn't be talking about a rebirth. But if you go back into African thought, which perhaps was greatly influenced by the diaspora, the likes of Booker Washington, the likes of Marcus Garvey, W.E.B. Du Bois, and so many others, you would find that the consciousness of being an African was mainly, it stemmed mainly from the situation where our brothers found themselves in after the slave trade. They wanted better, and they realized that they were people who had something to be proud of. Their minds, their ability to work, their ability to change their circumstances. Now, if you go into African literature, you have got the likes of Anta Diop, who I should admit beforehand that he has really influenced me so much. Now, Anta Diop says, as Africans, we have so much in common. We have a common history. From a linguistic point of view, well, Anta Diop was an Egyptologist. He says the links between Egyptian civilization and African languages, you can trace it to West Africa, and you talk about the wall of language. And he says there's a great element of common elements, so to speak, between Wolof and the early Egyptian language. What does that say to me? Africa had its influence. It had its roots at some point which were common for the people in Gambia, Senegal, through to Egypt. Now, you talk of sub-Saharan Africa, you talk about the Bantu languages, which is about so many common words, suggesting that perhaps some point there was a common dialect. Now, for those who are biblical, you would then ask, so where was our Babel if we had a common language at some point? What caused the separation, the dismantling of that language into many dialects? So I look at Africa, which to all intents and purposes has a common history. And this is essentially what Diop says. And it's not just Diop. If you look at other writers also, they admit that as Africa, we have a lot in common. You look at the players in the African Revolution, people like Nkrumah. Kwame looked at an Africa which is not defined by a region. He looked at Africa which is defined by its continental geography, not the tribal Africa that we are witnessing today. Now, perhaps to preempt the discussion, the tribal mindset says someone is Yoruba, someone is Zulu, and someone is Shona. That's the tribal mindset. Now we get a little improvement of that tribal mindset, which is now based on our colonial heritage. Someone is Zimbabwean, another is Kenyan, another is Zambian. And you see, this tribal mindset keeps us disunited. I cannot be proud of being Shona, then be proud of being African. No, I've got to be proud of being African first before I can be proud of being Shona. I want to draw an analogy here of the many rivers that we have in the world. Each river has got a tributary. Now, the tributary does not keep water to itself. It pours into a river. So soon we start talking about the mighty Nile. We talk about the Zambezi. We talk about the Limpopo. We talk about so many great rivers in Africa. But we forget that what makes these rivers great is the fact that it has got tributaries. And these would be the tribes that make each nation. So suppose we look at Zimbabwe as a river. It has got so many tributaries, which are Ndebele, Shona, Kore, and so many others. You go to Nigeria, you talk about the Igbo and the Yoruba. I don't know how many more tribes. Come to Zambia, you talk about the Chewa and the Vemba. Now, when you look at the various tribes in each country coming together, they make a river that is called that nation. But then if we continue to define this river according to the colonial geography, then we continue to be separated. We forget that this river is pouring into a bigger river, perhaps starting with the regional bigger river. We've got ECOWAS in West Africa, SADC in Central and Southern Africa. We've got the East African Community. Now, when we look at these regional groupings, they're an attempt to unite Africa, right? But then we should go beyond that and start looking at Africa as a whole. That's when you start talking about OAU. Now, in that framework, in that mindset, where we are saying we can do something together as Africans, the question that begs an answer is, where are we coming from? Have we defined our rich past as tribes so that we can use that to build the next tribe. The Tutsi and the Hutu hold hands together. The Igbo and the Yoruba hold hands together. And then Southern Africa holds hands together. Then all the regions hold hands together. The pride of each tribe, transforming that tribe into a national player who becomes an international African player and ultimately an African player. So this is the renaissance that I want to see. The pride that we have as tribes, but not being limited to tribes. We have that diversity, such a rich diversity, but we are not benefiting from it. I would want to throw a challenge here. Every single African culture, tribal lines, is actually richer than any other Western culture that we aspire for. Now, I hope not to get too carried away here, but look at this. In Africa, we still have the extended family. Such unity is not seen in many European cultures, in the Western cultures. Their family unit is me, wife, and children. But in Africa, the idea of uncle is new. In my culture, we have got big father. That's my father's elder brother. And small father, that's my father's younger brother. Common denominator, these are my fathers. I don't have cousins, I have got brothers and sisters. Now, this is something that I am proud of. Now, if I can then share this with my brother in Sudan and tell him that he is my brother, not just because my nose is as fat as his, not just because my skin color is as dark as his, but because I know somewhere we have a common thread, a common brotherhood that we seem to be losing, but we can regain and have a real renaissance. So, cut it shorter. What persuades me to be African is the fact that Africa was and Africa can be. Each one of us being responsible, playing their part. I don't think anybody can stop Africa. Now, why do we believe this statement, united we stand, divided we fall, and then fail to realize that that's why we need to put out so that we can have an African, truly can agenda that pushes forward Africanism to be the world player, the global player we can be. We have the resources. Everybody wants our resources. So why do we continue to carry a begging bowl? Go out there and beg. I mean, seriously, think about this. You have a man in the village. He has got a lot of cattle. He has got a lot of land. And then someone comes to him and says, your cattle are not good enough for meat. Don't eat them. I'll give you an alternative. Your fields are not good enough for you to plant food. So let me plant the food for you my way in your field. Then I'll feed you. You know what that reduces this man to? He becomes the poorest of the poor, despite the fact that he has got the cattle, he has got the land. He should be counted the rich person in the village, but he is counted the poorest. Why? Because he has abdicated real thinking. and given it to somebody else. And this is the case of Africa. We have the minerals. We have the climate. I know there's talk about global change, but hey, Africa still has a climate that can feed the world. But then we still carry that begging power when we have the resources. What's wrong with us? Is it mindset? Is it just a wrong praxis? If it is mindset, then it should be changed. If it's a wrong praxis, then we need to know, how did we get where we are? Where do we want to go and change that? So that we get where we can be, where we rightfully belong. And that's to be an Africa that everyone counts globally. Mr. Convener.
Wow, that was, you actually got me very, very enthralled there. And of course, one of the key things that people usually make reference to is, African Renaissance was so championed by the late Muammar Gaddafi. And of course, some people don't want to hear that name in terms of they see him as, well, they see him as someone who was a dictator and also a brutal dictator. But then, of course, Thabo Mbeki, was another very, very strong advocate of African Renaissance. And, I do remember, who is very well, and I think you talked about Cheikh Anta Diop, the essays, and that, everybody talks about all the time. And of course, Thabo Mbeki, when, even before he became president of South Africa, and, if I'm quoting from some of these arguments and his speeches again and again, Thabo Mbeki centered most things around, there was that talk about the brain drain in particular, and at another speech in, I believe in Soweto, he talked about Africans taking pride in their heritage and take charge of their lives, and so and of course we do. There's this thing by there are quite a few other speeches that people have made about basically African Renaissance, and the question there is, when we talk about the brain drain as a key aspect, reversing this brain drain, reversing and stopping, basically reversing is, to stop what has gone and bring back, and then, stopping the further, the fact is many young Africans today do not see their futures within the context of their own continent. And this is me digging deep into what Thabo Mbeki said, because for me, it actually, it does interest me quite a lot. And of course, when we talk about, there's this persistent human capital flight from Africa that you start to wonder, yes, we're lucky we keep producing very, very high quality, people in the academic field, in the medical field, in so many philosophical fields. And so if you go to the hospitals, if you go to the engineering stations abroad, if you go to the research laboratories, you find quite a lot of Africans there. But the fact of it is, the up and coming African does not see his or her future within the boundaries of the continent because of misrule, mismanagement of economic resources. And for example, people just do not see that hope. And we talk about the diamond mines in the old Zaire, Democratic Republic of Congo, and people used to accuse Mobutu Sese Seko, but now you have the Kabilas, and then you got all these, you got foreign companies coming over, buying those things for pittance, what you consider a pittance. And then imagine that when you have a mining firm that actually makes in a year more than what it actually paid to actually have, the licensing for that. mismanagement, visionlessness of our leaders, corruption in so many places. Look at in Guinea, when the country, everybody was on the streets celebrating the overthrow of is it Conde, and the military taking over, if I'm correct. And for some of us who have experienced military rule, some of us who know that, for example, in Nigeria in 1993, everybody, got on the streets to celebrate. Things were happening. 1996, when it was time for, 1985, Babangida took over 1993, then everybody was, it was time for Abacha to come. But every Nigerian still, I believe many of us still have the scars of what Abacha did to the nation, not just internally, but also the scars he put on the reputation of the country internationally. Especially with some brutal acts, the murder of the Kensano, Karosarowiwa and co. So when we see them over there in Guinea celebrating, jumping on the streets, we go like, what? You're celebrating the beginning. These guys aren't going to give over this power. Yaya Jammeh is still an example that it took everybody coming together to get Yaya Jammeh out of the Gambia. But things continue to get worse and worse and worse across the continent. What is the solution to this? How do we halt the brain drain? What can be done to stop this on a permanent basis? Oh, you're muted. Sorry, I will mute. Apologies. There was quite a lot of noise, so we have to mute everybody. Yeah, go on.
Thank you. Let's go back to a few names that you mentioned. Thabo, who, in my thinking, his model of African Renaissance is more evolutionary. And he says we should do this gradually. Let's not be in a rush. We have all the time. I don't know if we do. His sentiments are almost a confirmation of the stance of Booker Washington. Now, according to Booker Washington, the Black American had to work very hard, learn, develop himself. But you see, the direction of that learning, that hard work, was so that the Black man would then earn the trust of the white man. And perhaps through that, earn some respect. But what crushed his argument was, how does someone who has been disrespecting you, taking everything that you are and calling it barbaric, how does that person start to respect you? So some people argued that Booker Washington's approach was just going to ensure long-term enslavement and oppression. I would almost say that is the similar approach that Thabo has got. Thabo is a gentleman, a man of letters, a man of reason, which is good for people who need to grow. But you are looking, the basic assumption there is, we are in a world that is prepared to embrace Africa. The truth is, this world is not prepared to embrace Africa at all. It is prepared to embrace the resources of Africa, not the African. Now, the whole essence of globalization is when you have got international influence. Economics, politics, and the culture. You need to have a convergence of political ideas, which is virtually impossible because we have got differentiated political ideologies. We have communism, we have got fascism, which many want to believe that it is dead. It is not. We've got Semitism. Now we have Africanism. We've got capitalism. Now, which ism is going to drive the African agenda here? Only one ism can do that, Africanism. Now, do we take an evolutionary approach like Thabo? I respect Thabo. And if we were to continue, I'll tell you so many reasons why Thabo is on point. And one of them is that when he was president, that is when we saw some significant action from an African country towards Africanization. Because in South Africa, in 2001, they had what they called the establishment of the African Renaissance International Cooperation Fund. That was Thabo's brainchild. At least he was a man who was not just speaking, he was talking. Unfortunately, he got out of power, and Zuma did not even pay lip service to Africanism. And the current president, perhaps because he is also preoccupied with COVID and a few other issues, we have a situation where he has not made a stance for Africanism. So in South Africa, where we had that light, that hope, there seemed to be silence. Now, Gaddafi, who unfortunately is vilified in many places, is for the other model, which I would want to call the revolutionary model. And the revolutionary model says, we will not negotiate our way out of oppression. We will not negotiate our way out of poverty. We will not find solutions to Africa's problems by depending on NGOs, some of them having a capital agenda which promotes Europeanism. So for me, people like Dubois, Garvey, Patrice Lumumba, and Gaddafi, much as you may want to vilify him, for me, those are the people who took a revolutionary approach to being Africans. Now, look at the achievements of Gaddafi. With no help from the Bretton Woods institutions, IMF and World Bank, he worked on an agenda to make the desert green, and it was working. And he didn't owe anyone any money. He had his own version of socialism. Now, if you go into the Green Book, the Green Book written by Gaddafi, you would see some of his thinking. But what is he proving? He is proving that the revolutionary approach can actually turn the fortunes of Africa around. Now, I'm not saying he didn't have his excesses. I would need to have been in Libya and be a Libyan to be able to relate to that properly. But let's face it, the achievements that Gaddafi made with his revolutionary mindset are something that every African should be proud of. Now, every man is a hero to some and a terror to others. We have our own terrors in Africa. We have got the worst cases, Idi Amin Dada, if you go back to history. Currently, we have other cases also of extreme oppression and tyranny in Africa. But are we going to whine and continue crying about where we have been placed? Or we are going to say things must change? We go to West Africa, which has been the most famous place for military rule. There have been a few who I would still want to respect. Thomas Sankara, for example. And, well, to some extent, Jerry Rawlings, though I would still want to argue that his version of development was more Eurocentric than Afrocentric. Now, what am I saying here? There are certain realities in Africa that our elite, the educated elite, want to continue hammering on. It's true, we've had excesses, but it is time for us to redefine ourselves. See, these people, some of them, we even put them in office through the ballot. And once they are in office, they are given up to greed and corruption. So all their rhetoric before they are in office is maybe just to place them in the right place where they can start looting also. Perhaps if you were to put me in power tomorrow, despite what I am saying today, I would then also become very corrupt. I would start thinking of my brother and give him a job, my brother's son, give him a job. Trump did it. But here we are in Africa, having this democratic diarrhea. Why do I say democratic diarrhea? We are told what democracy is by the West, who do not practice their own form of democracy, but they want to foist it on Africa, and then they come up with the standards that we take as blueprints. Our democratic models, unfortunately, are Western.
Wow, this is rich. I think we've lost him temporarily. I think the connection from his end has gone off temporarily. So we'll be hoping he reconnects. But he has made mention of quite a lot of significant points. He has redefined African Renaissance, using, not the geographical thing, but and not in terms of the color of the skin as well, but, as an attitude, as a culture, as, Africanism, within his own definition, which I find very brilliant and very interesting, is not a function of the color of your skin, and it's not a function of where you are born. It is a function of the beliefs, a function of your thought pattern, your orientation, which I find very, very interesting. Of course, one of the key things, and I hope once it comes back, I think it's back. I think it's back. Yeah, you can have the floor again now. I think he's back.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I think the network went kaput, so just go on. Yeah.
Sorry, my internet.
Yeah.
And you know why we have these problems, these internet problems in Africa? This is where we are in terms of globalization. Our technology, our communications is actually not directed by Africa. We do not have control over who we talk to and what we talk about. As long as we cannot control who we talk to and what we talk about, somebody out there will determine when we can talk about Africanism. And if the internet falls like it just did now, I look at the internet in terms of a tool that is Western. Africa lags behind in terms of communications. Now, perhaps, let's just say this here and now. He who controls communication controls what is talked about. They control the mind. They control thought processes. That is why any Africanist ideas which fly in the face of Western democracy should be put down. And that is why, in my opinion, Gaddafi is now history, and there is chaos in Libya. And very soon, they will also be carrying the begging bowl and going to the IMF and the World Bank. There will be another example of a failed state. Robert Mugabe, who has been painted as a dictator, what was his real sin? Give back to the African his land. Before he started talking about land, he was the blue boy of the British. At independence, Lord Soames is on record saying he has got a black skin, but he is one of us. And they allowed him to rule because they didn't see him threatening their position. Zimbabwe was not just a bread basket for Southern Africa. Literally, it was the vegetable garden of Britain. Who was in the fields? The white men, the British. Feeding who? His own people. With whose resources? Your resources, my resources. Now, when Mugabe eventually says enough is enough, or whatever pressures made him to say that aside, he says, I want the land for my people, and I will give my people land. Suddenly, he is a monster. Sanctions, smart sanctions. Now, what is smart about sanctions? Perhaps the only thing about smart sanctions is that it is a smart way of disabling somebody without using a gun. But now, despite those smart sanctions, here is a case. Libya did very well despite the smart sanctions. So what would we say? Perhaps African Renaissance can actually be smarter than the smart sanctions. If African Renaissance can be smarter than the smart sanctions, then it can be smarter than our corrupt leaders. It can be smarter than European capitalism. It can be smarter than Eastern communism. We need to redefine what Africanism is. We need something that is homegrown, something that is African, something that we can be proud of as Africans. Our models for our institutions, whether they are financial institutions, political institutions, they are all Eurocentric. Most of our international agendas are actually modeled against the OECD model. And we still want to be truly African when our mindset still extols that which is European. Where does this leave us? It leaves us in a place where we are playing catch up. Everybody else is in front, and we are way behind. Talk about a race where you are trying to play catch up and you are riding a lame horse. How do you catch up with everybody else? Now, am I saying that Africans are lame? No. No. But we are following a lame agenda because it's not our agenda. We are following foreign ideologies, which are not our ideologies. That's the lame horse that we are riding as Africans. And as a result, we can continue talking, but not changing anything. Our education is compromised. Why do I say so? You need Western medicine for African diseases. You need Western farming methods for African terrain. Go back to history. Mwalimu Nyerere tried. Uhuru and Ujama. Let's get some progress here. But according to Professor Mazrui, Ali Mazrui, who is one of my influencers, he says Nyerere did a good thing. Think development for his people. But where did he fall? He went and got machinery from the West, designed for the prairies in America. And he wanted to use that in the hills of Africa. He didn't have industries to make spare parts for the equipment that he got from the West. He didn't have engineers to fix the equipment that he got from the West. So what did he do? He took a Western solution and he put it on an African problem, and disaster followed. And despite the songs that were sing for him in the West, they hide their mouths and laugh in their hands. They failed again. So we've got so many testimonies of a failing African agenda because of prescribed solutions. Where is our creativity? Where is our innovation as Africans? Right now, we are told that if you want to treat a headache, you get Panadol. If you have got a running stomach, you get mucain syrup from somewhere. Because these have been tried and tested in a European laboratory. I go to the bush and pick a few herbs that worked for my grandmother and my grandfather. That is bad. That's bad medicine. But it works. Now, we have solutions which are African and they work. But because our education has made us Euro-centered, everything that is African is suspect. It is worse than Chinese. And this is sad. I have a big father, I'm trying not to say my uncle, who would treat people coming from far and wide with all sorts of diseases. He was not a witch doctor, he was simply a herbalist. He knew his herbs, and they worked. And there were testimonies. Is that not something that I should be proud of? Or I am very proud of that. And it's just a pity that I was busy going to school, learning a Europeanized curriculum. So I lost an opportunity of learning all those herbs that he knew that worked. And here I am. Every day I look to Western medicine with its so many side effects. And yet, if we go back to those who deal with the plants, they'll tell you that plants have got so much less in terms of side effects than modern medicine. And what we call modern is everything that is Western. Where do we stand? An education that denies us of being African, and we continue in our primary schools, in our secondary schools, in our tertiary institutions. A successful learner is one that is able to speak French fluently. A successful learner is one that is able to speak English fluently. There is no success in having a creative mindset which says, I will go to the land and farm and I'll plant some herb from the African bush and I'll commercialize it. You know, in Namibia, some European countries are even trying to have patents on woodea, a herb that is well known in health circles as to cause someone to slim. So if you want to slim, come to Namibia, we have woodea here. It will help you lose weight. Nobody talks about that. Rooibos, famous tea, comes from a red bush in South Africa. It is a very good detoxer. But where do we get our education from? Where do we get our learning from? From Europe. And of course, they'll bring European solutions to African problems. And we embrace European solutions to African problems. And in that way, we lose our identity. The best way to destroy a people is to destroy their culture. And this is actually what globalization seeks to do. Create a new global culture, which is driven by technology. We talk 4G, 5G, now we talk about the Internet of Things. They want to call it the fourth industrial revolution. What does it do? Extol the virtues of Europe. Is it bad for Europe to be doing that? No, no. They have to do what they have to do, and they are doing it very well. But we are not doing what we have to do, or what we have to do, we are doing very badly, which is almost the same as not doing anything. They control our food. Tomatoes will rot in Africa. I haven't seen any place in Europe where tomatoes are rotting because there is no market. But in Africa, left, right, and center. And they have even created a new word to apologize to us for calling us third class, third world. They now call us the developing world. Now, friends, developing means you are not yet developed. You are still developing. Now, what is developing about Africa? The mindset, the economics. What is developing about Africa? Because right now, more slums are rising, poverty is increasing, unemployment is increasing, corruption is increasing. All the things that you do not want on the social, political, and economic front are getting worse for Africa, despite the fact that we are perhaps the most well-endowed continent in the world. The rich people, in terms of resources, are the biggest beggars. That makes no sense to me. That means we have lost it somewhere. And we need to find that place where we have lost it. Find our identity. And platforms like this, if we are going to talk here and not change, starting with our own families, then perhaps we have already failed before we start. We want to be successful on the global level, but we are failing on a continental level. We are not failing on a continental level because there's something wrong with the continent. We are failing on the continental level because we are failing at a national level. And we are not failing at a national level because there's something wrong with the nation. We are failing at a national level because we are failing on a tribal level. And we only fail on a tribal level if we have failed at a family level. The agenda of Renaissance starts with you and me. And it doesn't start tomorrow. It starts right now by knowing where we are. If we know where we are, then we ask ourselves, where do we want to be? That gap is what we need to address. It is about knowing who we are so that we may redefine who we want to be. That gap needs to be redressed. It is about knowing how we got here so that we may know how we can get there. Now, I am not saying let's continue crying and mourning about capitalism, about colonialism and slavery. That's our history that brought us here. So it is almost sad. We know where we are. And perhaps we also know how we got here. But if you want to look at it, we got here because we lost our culture. We lost our African identity, and we aspired to something that was foreign. There was nothing wrong in embracing technology and business opportunities, but there was everything wrong in losing what we stand for as Africans, in agreeing to be divided and continuing to be divided to this day on a family level, tribal, national, continental level. There is no place for us in the world if we continue being disunited. Africa is known as a place where there is so much civil war. Hutus against Tutsis. In my home country, perhaps no civil war, but bad blood between the Shona and the Ndebele. And this is working very well for our underdevelopment or a misdevelopment. Because as long as we have these tribal demarcations, we cannot aspire for inter-African cooperation. Now, people like Thabo Mbeki, people like Kwame, Lumumba, and many others have tried to quick start the Renaissance agenda. And they've done their part. But you see, a quick start is just a quick start. After starting, we need to build momentum. And you'll find that after the 1960s, 1970s, the flame of African Renaissance, which is birthed from Pan-Africanism, has been dying. A few small voices here, and right now we talk of Thabo Mbeki, who is going to be the current torchbearer for Pan-Africanism. Lumumba. I'm not talking about Patrice this time. I'm talking about brother Lumumba from Kenya. Is he going to win this battle alone? Most of us are sitting here, and Western sentiment is what comes out of our mouths. Africa becomes synonymous with corruption. Now, if I had asked it at the beginning, what comes into your mind when we say African leader? Someone was going to say corruption. Are these the monikers or the names that we want to define Africa? It's not an endearment to be called a backward continent, a corrupt continent. No. It's not an endearment to be called poor countries. No, it's an embarrassment. And until we get embarrassed of ourselves as individuals for not pushing an African agenda, we will continue to grovel and pay homage to Western democracy, Western economics, Western capitalism. What is wrong with being capitalist? Absolutely nothing. But why don't we have African capitalism? The version of African capitalism is corruption. Quick money for me. And you know the sad thing, corruption in Africa is not driven by Africa or Africans. No, they're only the pieces on the chessboard. Who corrupts the Africans? Western capital. Who funds our political campaigns? Western capital. And of course, they don't fund our political campaigns for nothing. What is in it for them? Control. And once you control the head, you don't need to worry about the tail of the snake or the tail of the crocodile. And this is what is happening. Somebody said to me, everyone has got a price. Some have got a very high price. Some, a loaf of bread is good enough. And this is the game that is played with our politicians. Most of them have a price. And when they've been corrupted, they in the West say power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So what do? They make sure, or the West, they make sure that they put this idea of absolute power in our leaders so that they can be absolutely corrupted. I was shocked a few days ago when I read that BAT had actually been trying to corrupt Mugabe, my hero, by funding his campaigns. And of course, BAT denies any wrongdoing. Now, we have got covert and overt machinations of the West. Sometimes they are so subtle. They will finance the right hand, which is opposing the left hand, so that they will continue to be in opposition. They'll never finance the right hand and the left hand so that they come together. So the principle of divide and rule continues. And it is driven by technology. They give us their technology, which pushes forward their culture, and then we become enculturated with a Western culture, which unfortunately is only superficial. And because our Westernization is superficial, we become what Fanon calls walking lies, which have got nothing to offer to our brothers, except great gluttonous words which stick to the teeth when we speak. And then you'll give me a standing ovation when we come to the end of this, because I've been saying big words. Story of Africa. We will quote Barack Obama, who, in my opinion, is more American than African. I got nothing against it. Politics of the stomach, the one who controls the food, controls the action. And this is what is working for Africa. Our riots, our uprisings are driven by hunger, which is instigated not by our political leaders, but by the West, which corrupts our political leaders. And as long as we are fighting, they pick the pieces. Who is benefiting the most from the war in DRC? Definitely not DRC. Who benefits the most from unrest in any part of the world? Definitely not the people who are fighting. Angola has got diamonds, has got oil, but Angola is rated one of the poorest countries in the world. And it is on a record that the ex-president, Dos Santos, could not tolerate dissension. Dissent had to be crushed. But he was never labeled a dictator. Why? Because the West was getting all they want from Angola. Angola was also a case that would be used to stop the spread of Eastern communism, socialism. So they would allow him to continue, and he would rule with impunity. Mobutu, one of the most embarrassing cases. Who was making Mobutu stand? Of course, our American friends. Talk about Vietnam. So a dictator who serves Western interests may be as corrupt as anything that you can imagine, but that dictator is going to remain in power because he's going to be armed with the intelligence that comes from the CIA. Why? Because as long as he's there, he serves their agenda. And this is the sad story of Africa. Our leaders mean well sometimes when they get into office, but they owe their allegiance to capital, Western capital, and Western capital rules the day. I am putting it to you, friends, that corruption in Africa is not homegrown. No, it is actually Western grown and then imposed on Africa. We are bought, we are selling our souls. So our political agenda will come crashing. Our social cultural agenda will come crashing. Our economies will never rise until we realize that it is not about political leaders. It is about the African in you and the African in me. Now imagine this scenario. We have a dictator. This is purely hypothetical, right? So I am going to use Zimbabwe as a case here. The consequences will be on me. Right? Who is happy with the current government? Perhaps some, perhaps many, perhaps a few. Who is unhappy? Perhaps a lot more, perhaps. So we have a political divide. How about in the face of the international community, with all their cameras, satellites, 5G technology, we speak as one voice and we march to State House in Zimbabwe and we say to the president, now follow me here. We are here, we do not want you to get out of power. We want you to rule us, Mr. President. But we want change. And we are not leaving your doorstep until we see change. We don't want you to get out of office. Rule us. But this is the change that we want. Hypothetical, yes. And it will not work. Why? Because we are still having this tribal mentality, tribal mindset, right? My stomach, my family, my tribe. So the president is accused of bringing in people from his tribe and giving them key positions. Rude as this may sound, who would put people in key positions that he doesn't trust? You see how narrow our trust is. It's so narrow that it is actually tribal. It is not national. And who do we blame for that? Have I reached out as an individual to the next people with a different tribal moniker? Or we still have, we are superior because we are the majority in the country? And that's sad. That's really, really sad. So what am I saying here, my brothers and sisters? I am saying we are focusing on the wrong problems in Africa. Corruption is a symptom of a problem. It is not the problem. Take away the problem and you take away corruption. And the greatest problem that we have as Africa, which doesn't come from Africa, which comes from our tribal settings, is lack of unity. We are not united. We cannot speak with one voice. We cannot defend the oil that is in Nigeria as Africa. We cannot defend the oil that is in Angola as Africa. We cannot defend the diamonds that are in Botswana, in South Africa as Africa. We cannot defend the legacy of Gaddafi as Africa. Instead, we see the evil man that is Gaddafi. Which country succeeds without a strong leader? Does that mean that every strong leader then is automatically a tyrant? And this is the common narrative. A strong leader who is against Western principles is automatically a tyrant. Right now, Rwanda, when they want to be polite, they say the president of Rwanda is a strong man, the strong man of Rwanda. What are they really saying? The dictator of Rwanda. But look at how Rwanda is developing because of the strong man. And we see the dictators, because the media, which drives international news, has got a Western agenda which is not African, and what it calls democracy has got to meet Western standards. Look at the tigers of Asia. You want to teach me about democracy? What is common with all of them? The ones that have been successful have had strong leaders, and perhaps sometimes with a not so rosy.
Let me come in at this point. Are we, because some of these leaders, yes, they've improved their countries, but a lot of them were brutal. Brutal. People disappeared from the streets.
True.
The press was suppressed.
True.
Journalists were detained.
True.
And many of them also, indulge in crass acts of corruption.
True.
Because I'm looking at it that it might just not be a case of the narrative. That a lot of these, yes, I do agree with you to a large extent about the narrative by the West. If Trump was an African leader, in fact, what he did with the recent elections, I can imagine the speech by the American government. It would have been like, we have noted the crass act of undemocratic acts being perpetrated by President Trump of Namibia, for example. And we want to say very, very clearly to him that we will not tolerate any acts that go against the will of the people. And that we are watching events closely, and we want to ask him to respect the press, respect the parliament, respect the ballot box, and that America is prepared to take steps to help protect democracy in Africa. So I quite understand. If Trump was president of Namibia and was misbehaving like he did with the last elections and everything. But you know what? So we do know that there's this thing about all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. But some of these strong men as well, you look at the man in Uganda, all of a sudden, by miracle, he woke up, his bishop helped him discover that, you know what, your date of birth is actually wrong. You're actually younger than what you have as your date of birth. You're 2 years younger. Because of that, you can still contest the presidency. It is lunacy. So, and that is why many people go against the concept of the strong man. Because is it not about building institutions rather than building the individual? Because it is, once the institutions function, look at what happened in Austria. The man came in on a crest wave of popularity. But because of corruption allegations dating back to a period before he was prime minister, when he was, 2016, I believe, they said he, favors, in order to get favorable press coverage. The man resigned. That is an institution functioning, not necessarily a strong man. So what do you say to that?
Thank you very much. An institution, what makes an institution function? Forget the rhetoric, rule of law. What makes an institution function is the people who are making the institution. And here is a case where people in America will stand up and the whole nation goes to the street and say, we don't want this. And there is change. We have seen presidents all over the world resigning for a racist remark. Now, what institution is working here? Is it the law? No. It is a united people. Now, we are going to cry about our institutions which are not functioning. It takes us back to what I've just said. Are they African institutions, or these are Eurocentric or westernized institutions? Now, how do you expect westernized institutions to function for Africa? They will only work if they are supported, upheld by their makers. That's why America will say, we are watching events carefully. But when Donald Trump gets into office with a minority, right, using some legal loophole, right, the number of states are what determine who becomes the president, not the number of citizens. Huh? So somebody rules not by majority, but by minority through a legal loophole. Is that the version of democracy that we want to really copy? Hello? And when our own politicians come back home, they realize that we are going to lose this election. So what do? They go to their strongholds, break down that stronghold, which was one constituency, into 12. So automatically they have now 12 constituencies in their pocket, and it's legal. And we still say that the problem is with Africans. I agree that some of our politicians have had their excesses. Now I'm trying to be polite and not mention names here. That's why I picked on Dada, Idi Amini, right? But what I am saying here is the narrative from the West is not just a common and ordinary narrative. What is coming out of our political and economic institutions is adulterated Africanism. Now, if you call it adulterated, there's nothing impure about it. Remember what I said earlier. When our men are in the bush or were in the bush with guns fighting for political liberation, they were called terrorists. But what did we call them? Comrades. When they got into power, Mozambique is an extreme case. They said, all Portuguese out of here, this place belongs to Mozambique and Mozambicans. And of course, they had not created an infrastructure so that they would be able to run their own country. They shot themselves in the foot. Good intentions, but pushed forward wrongly. And as a result, Mozambique is a beggar. Samora Machel, who in my book is one of the true Pan-Africanists, is a dead man.
Okay, I think it's like, okay, continue. We're just going to go into questions in the next 2 minutes because we need to just get those who are on the panel involved. I'm sure they have a lot of questions for you. So,
all right, let me just say this. We have in a situation where our comrades get into the office, right? And these people just change the tactic. Instead of using the guns, this time they use money, the carrot. Hey, you towed the line, and this is what you are going to have. And you know what happens? When they become dispensable, the West leaves them alone, naked, hanging. So what do? They become dictators because they're being left to stand alone now. They're naked. They know if they get out of office, they will be prosecuted, because these people around here can easily become an institution that works. So repression comes all over again. Why? Because the West has had their day in our minds, in our pockets, in our political halls. And we call that denial of democracy. But that's exactly the piece that they moved. You know, it's a case of tails, you lose. Heads, I win. So the West is not losing here until we realize that the voice should not be, that should be heard is not the politician's voice. It is your voice and my voice, the common man's voice. Let's change our strategy. Let's have something that is genuinely African, something that is so radical that we will say, no, we do not want this president to go. We want him in power because he is strong, but we are going to be at his doorstep to make him change for the better of Africa. And if he realizes that he is not being threatened, these people want a genuinely and truly African revolution. Perhaps what he has already stolen, he will stop stealing now, and we'll see some real change. What are we prepared to lose so that we become truly African? The last time I checked, I know what we are not prepared to lose. Our westernization. We are not prepared to lose that so that we may become truly African. That is why they will continue to pillage our resources by hook, by crook, rule us by covertly and overtly.
Wow, thank you so much. Look, the way it is, I could listen on and on and on and on and on and on. It's been so brilliant. And look, on a personal note, I personally share a lot, virtually everything. So is that strong man? Maybe because in Namibia, you've really had a very easy ride, you know. So, and in Nigeria, we've had some strong men at our own risk. We've had some strong men who have made life miserable for Nigerians, you know. So when Nigerians hear about a strong man, they run. You know, when you hear about the name Babangida, the man ruined the nation. If you have the name Abacha, you run, you know, because of what we experience. We experience brutality. We experience corruption at its worst. We experience cronyism at the worst. And, you know, we experience the very worst of it. An economy that was bubbling, you know, and, you know, very terrible neoliberal policies, you know, which the worst of them were introduced. And of course, that's one area that, assuming we had a bit more time, I would have wanted us to go into neoliberalism, you know, as a concept within the context of Africanism, which you have tried to preach rather than African Renaissance, you know. So, but hopefully we'll have you back next time by God's grace. But as is our practice, we usually try to dedicate about 30 minutes to questions, but we have just about 25 minutes for questions now. So I'm just going to start. I think the first person that raised the hand was, I don't know, but I guess I'll just go by, usually we give everybody on the call, we give them a chance to ask questions. And I'm hoping that there are 2 questions on our social media stream, but I'm going to start with the questions in-house. So let me start with our Secretary General, Comrade Fayemi. Let's have your question or comments, Comrade Fayemi. Apologies. I'm just going to have to change the security settings. We kept getting a lot of noise from someone who kept on muting and disrupting things, so we had to lock it. Okay, so Comrade Fayemi, right. You can unmute now. So.
Yes. Thank you very much, Mr. Convener. I want to sincerely appreciate our special guest, Mr. Forward Makwanavarara, if I got that name right. And I keenly listened to his presentation and how well he was able to talk about the globalization and most especially the Fed in moving Africa forward. My question is not really about the presentation and the topic of that discourse. But I want to quickly bring our notice to a campaign we ran in 2012. I was privileged to be part of the SOTU campaign, where we talk about the treaties, the African treaties and charters of demand. Most of those treaties and demand, yes, as it is now, are not well domesticated in our countries. And going away to the globalization, can we practically put our challenges, our socio-economic issues, our challenges, our problem related to globalization as we are? Globalization in Africa has not even propelled some fundamental changes and positive dimension to our growth as a country. All of us knew what happened in the last couple of days when Facebook and when we had issue with WhatsApp, globally it affected our communication as it is. And I remember you saying that where we don't have control of our communication, where we don't have control of who we speak to or how we speak to our people, is automatically a challenge. But in this case, how well do we now see us as Africa, utilizing our local resources, in turning around our fortune as a continent? That is just my take. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's very, very key. So I'm like conflicted a bit in terms of, do we let you take? Okay, let's let you answer that. Then we'll go back to everybody so that we don't just pile it up and then it becomes mixed up. So over to you. Just unmute yourself, Mr. Makwanavarara. Yeah.
The problems that we are facing here are not problems that are insurmountable. Our greatest challenge in Africa when it comes to globalization is because we are playing catch up. Now imagine this scenario. From Cape to Cairo, we sit down together as one voice, and we say, why should our gold price be fixed in London, a country that doesn't have any gold? Why should the uranium in Namibia, why should we be told who to sell to, who not to sell to? We can sell uranium and so many other things to Korea, for example, but Korea is an enemy of the West. Not that Korea has gone to the doorstep of the West and shot anybody, but because Korea have their own agenda, they also want to be a superpower. I know. So we are saying now, somebody should decide who becomes a superpower, who doesn't. We are also effectively saying, if we can agree on that certain states deserve to have nuclear armaments, certain states do not have, we are automatically saying, despite having uranium in Africa, we cannot aspire to have our own nuclear weapons. What's the point in having a resource that whose use is going to be determined by another? Communications. Kenya has got its own Silicon Valley. What does that tell me? You've got a lot of smart minds in Kenya. I was reading the other time about this Zimbabwean guy who is talking about powering a vehicle from hydrogen created from water. And there's a West African, I'm forgetting the names, a West African businessman who wants to fund that. But you know why that will not see the light of day in the world? Because we don't have enough money to promote it. We don't have the communication network to publicize it. In Namibia, a few days ago, the president committed a great sin against the banking sector when he publicly advised people to use some internet application which buys and sells crypto.
Okay. I'm thinking his connection has gone again, but I'm hoping he joins us back. It's been a very interesting discussion. Once again, it's been a very brilliant. He's shown such a very deep understanding of the problems of the challenges of Africanism and quote and unquote Africanization and African Renaissance as we topicked it today. I'm hoping he will rejoin us in a bit. If he's okay, I think he's back now. So I'm just gonna. I think he's back. So I'm just going to be taking another question now so that we take them together with that so we can let me go with I don't know if the provost of our institute is able to talk. Usually at times when she joins, she's not. Senator, are you able to make a comment? Are you able to unmute where you are? Or do I just go over you? Oh, okay. Okay. I'll go to Mrs. Bosede Dara. I applied Bosede Dara. So you fire on Bosede Dara. Ask your question. We can't hear you. Are you very far away from your device? We can scarcely hear you.
I don't. Can you hear me now?
It's a lot better now. It is better now.
Okay. I say good evening to everybody and especially to Mr. Ford.
Good evening.
My question is on basically with Nigeria now, and it has always been a burning issue, by extension of African countries than the world. Most of the time, it is not that people don't want to vote. I'm talking about voting now. People really want to vote, but when they look further, they will be like, oh, what is the essence of voting when at the end of the day, my vote will not count? And that has always been, very much with us. And you discover that people don't even bother because of a truth. The votes don't count. When we have all these people coming around and printing voters card and all sorts and, rigging the election, and people just got tired of going to vote. So I just want to pose the question for that. What can we do in this situation whereby our vote can count and, African can be relied on as far as voting is concerned? Because in one of our applied department, we have those ones that go about monitoring votes. This is going to go a long way for us if we can be able to find solution, to saying no to rigging. We're standing by it and our vote counts and we're able to elect the person that we really want to elect. So that is my question to Mr.
Wow, thank you so much. That's very, very deep. So I'll just I'll let you, if you can just take that in 5 minutes so that we take another question. Thank you so much, Ms. Bosede Dara, for that. She's someone I know who is very passionate about the growth, the development of the country and the continent at large. So Mr. Forward, over to you.
Thank you. First of all, voter apathy is not just a Nigerian nightmare. It is a global nightmare. A few years back in the United States, they witnessed the greatest voter turnout because of the Obama syndrome. Everybody got excited. They wanted to vote because there was a freshman, a fresh face, something unorthodox for America, a black man who is saying things that every American wants to hear. In my country, we have got about 14 million people, but when you go for elections, less than half of them will vote. Now, voter apathy is not just a Nigerian problem. What causes voter apathy? You have already said it. Votes are not the silver bullet. It has been proved in the United States that the votes of the majority can still be circumvented through the law a legal loophole. In Africa, perhaps we are more direct. We rig the ballot. And if the ballot doesn't work, we use the gun. Now, rigging will come in so many forms. Rigging simply means that you have skewed the play field. It's not level. It favors you, right? Somebody is defending while they are downhill, and you are attacking when you are coming from uphill. That's rigging for me. Whatever form, whatever redefinition we might want to make. So as long as we are trusting voting as a solution, sorry, we're going to be like dogs chasing their own tails. This is where I created my own hypothetical state, where we create something that is purely African. Voting is not essentially African, though it is very good, it's democratic. But you see, democracy, even that democracy, they decide who we can vote for. There are certain rules which disqualify certain people. In my country, it is also age. You are disqualified because of age. Is that not rigging? So, voter apathy, I would want to say the world has been given a sleeping pill where they trust the ballot as a way of talking, not realizing that the real power is in what we say to each other. We speak democracy, but doctored democracy. There's a prescription of what democracy is and what it is not. And this voting is used as a standard, mainly to say that in Africa, there's vote rigging, there's corruption. So these monikers stand, or these nicknames stand. We have got more failed states in Africa. But we vote. And the few that still vote, still elect a leader. Why is it that the few that vote still are not strong enough to change the ruling regime? That's because voting is not the answer. We need to go back and be truly African. And being truly African is not about a democracy that is decided by a ballot.
Let me come in at that point. If you're saying that we need to find a solution that is different from democracy and that is outside the context of the ballot, are we not? Is that not chaos that we're looking for at that point? Because democracy, the beauty of it for me is that yes, they do read it. Yes, they do manipulate it. But in some instances, the fact of it is I've seen clubs that even rig elections, executive committee elections at club level. So a lot of times we talk about governments and all things, and you made the right point there about all of us making all the noise and then we're not even making a difference where we are. You know, but what would you advocate as an alternative, as a workable alternative to democracy? Because democracy makes me feel, you know what, I don't like the face of Mr. Kamuzu Banda. And you know what, I can actually go to the poll and vote him out. Yes, it can be the case that he rigs the election, but it does still give me some satisfaction. Because minus democracy, is it not the rule of might and rule of chaos? And coups and counter coups. So what is the alternative you're advocating that is actually workable, that is different from democracy?
You have said it well, and you have just shown where the real sleeping pill is. The satisfaction that I can vote you out. That's where I'll sleep and say, yes, Amandla, power to the people. Because we can vote you out. Because this is a democratic nation. Look at the American example. There are basically two parties. And in Africa, they want a multi-party democracy. And by multi, they mean more than two, preferably. But in the United States, it's basically two. Now, either way, if Democrats win, Americans have won. If Republicans win, Americans have won. Now, in Africa, it's a different ball game. We will vote based on the prescribed democracy. Now, I didn't say we do not want democracy. We should do away with the democracy. Okay. I said we want an African kind of democracy.
Oh, absolutely. I agree with you.
Homegrown democracy.
Oh, thank you.
Because if we have a homegrown democracy, there is a revolution, two words, revolution and evolution. We will get an African-grown democracy through revolution. But we can only sustain it through evolution.
Absolutely.
Now, I'm saying here, this is our situation. We've been given this democratic sleeping pill. Do you want to continue sleeping and just be content? I can vote you out after 5 years. And then the guy say, okay, see you 5 years from now. I got the guns, you don't. So where is your satisfaction? So your satisfaction is in telling me to get into the office, right? But your dissatisfaction is this. You can't get me out of the office. How often has it worked that the ruling government is just dislodged just like that in the first round of elections in Africa?
Yeah, but
government has not been accused of.
But the antidote to anti-democracy, it sounds tautological, but antidote to anti-democracy is still democracy. Now, we can have several examples. Of course, I use the example of the man in Uganda, but maybe we should leave this till another time because I want them to be able to ask you other questions. Let's take at least 2 more questions and we finish. Because the man in Uganda, we get the example. Is he 67 years or something? He wasn't qualified to contest in these elections. And his priest miraculously discovered, like I said earlier, that the man is actually younger than he thinks he is. Imagine you coming to me to say, you know what, you're actually younger than your age. And I'm so happy. That same priest would probably have been killed if he discovered that he was older than what he was. So you know that in Africa, it is not even uncommon for people to have their own priests, political priests. In my country, for example, there are certain people, when they open their mouth to give prophecies, they always say, in fact, there was one who said recently, if this political party fields forward, they will win the election. But if they make the mistake of fielding, so we have them. And they have their own, you just know that these are not really truthful people. But just so someone else can ask a question, let me just go to our panel again. We'll probably only be able to take 2 more questions. So which of you, I know Senator is not able to, Ms. Sheung, are you able to, do you want to ask a question? Or Comrade Kenny? Or Comrade Lukman? Any one of you? I can take 2 of you, just two because of our time. Okay, so Comrade Kenny, do you want to go first? Oh, Comrade Lukman is already unmuted. So you go on first. That's fine.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening, Mr. Convener, sir.
Good evening.
I really appreciate the guest speaker. He has really done well. But on the issue of revolution, yes, we should not deceive ourselves. Revolution, as the way the situation of Africa, the way it is right now, revolution seems to be the answer. But I would not want us to go through it because it's too destructive. Even Mandela himself in South Africa later on regretted some of his actions that later leads to revolution in South Africa. That is why throughout his life, he always preached peace till his death. Although he could not mention it out, but you will discover that he always preached peace. One thing I think one of our members have said it earlier. The only issue we have is that we could not get the trust of our leaders. And how do we go about it? That is the first step I think we need to do in Africa. Yes, people are ready. Let's take Nigeria, for example. In 2015, Goodluck Jonathan was the incumbent president, which we know in Nigeria today, it is not easy for you to defeat the incumbent in Nigeria. But people were determined because they believe in the person. In the past, people did not vote for, did not really vote for APC, but they voted for Buhari himself because they believe in his person and they believe he has the answer to our problem. But what is happening today in Nigeria, and that is where we lost the trust. People do not believe in those leaders anymore. That is the situation we have in Africa. How can we go about it? How can we change it? But me, I don't believe in it. I don't really believe revolution is the only answer. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. I'm sure we want to thank you so much. Comrade Lukman Hayele always comes up with some, tricky questions, and for me, it does indicate to me he's a very thoughtful person. Thank you so much. Comrade Kenny has actually written quite a lot in the chat about the level of participation in elections, and there was something I was reading on our platform today about Big Brother Nigeria. 170 million votes during the contest at 30 naira per vote, which turned out to be 5.1 billion naira. And during the last elections, I think just about 20-something million, maybe 27 or thereabout million votes across the federation. Of course, the 170 million votes is total over the entire lifetime of the show, So, but just imagine that, you have about 40 million youth or 40 million Nigerians voting again and again and again, or at least maybe 30 million voting each time, So that is where we are, and that's the conundrum where we found ourselves. I don't know if I can take just one more, and that will be the last question for the day. Comrade Kenny or Mr. Which of you wants to go forward, or we just leave it at this point? I know there have been a few people who raised their hands, but we're really struggling for time. We're definitely going to bring Mr. Makwavarara back for a part two, hopefully by God's grace sometime in November. I will look for a space in our calendar, subject to his own availability as well. So okay, I think we'll just leave it at that point. Let me just leave you to answer those questions, give you like about 10 minutes, and then we'll close for tonight.
Thank you. Sorry, I lost a bit of what you said because my internet is playing up here. I'm actually connected through a cell phone, and it's not the best.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Go on,
a quick comment. The tautology of democracy. Indeed, it will sound like that because, hey, we want to speak, we want to be heard, and we can only be heard if we are given that space to be heard, and that's democracy, right? But now my problem is the westernized kind of democracy. We want to create space that an African voice can be heard, speaking about African issues to an African leader. Now, this thing about voter apathy, unfortunately, instead of helping us, it robs us of that voice. Now, there are situations where people will turn out and speak. And when they speak, it doesn't matter how many guns there are, because you can rig where there's a difference maybe of 20-30%. But where people speak with one voice, 90%, it's a bit difficult to rig. You will find that the results will be held up for the next 1 week or two. They will still be counted. Now, what I'm simply saying is we need to think like Africans. not to continue doing the things that we have been doing. Now, doing the same thing that you have been doing and hoping for a different result, I don't know how that works. The equation is the same. Your methodology of solving it is not changing, and you want to have a different answer. Seriously. So, yeah, we need African democracy that starts with education and education and education. So if we start educating ourselves and our children to be aware of our environment, our intellectuals start pushing an agenda that educates an African mind for an Africa that will stand tall in the world, for a global Africa. Then we have started. Because when there's a call to action, we will go as one person. If in the house the mother and the mother are disagreeing, the children will be divided. And if the mother and the children are divided, the tribes will be divided. The nations will be divided. Africa will be divided. We want change in Nigeria, we want change everywhere, we want change in Zimbabwe. Even the ones which have been praised for democracy, there's still lots of room for improvement. So until and unless we start thinking, I am an African because we are Africans, we have a problem. As long as I am saying, we are Africans because I am an African, we are putting the cart before the donkey. And the cart doesn't pull the donkey. So what we need here is something similar to the Chinese kind of education, where one is Chinese because they are Chinese. They speak as Chinese, act as Chinese, for one Chinese, with one Chinese. So, and now on the aspect of trusting our leaders. Trust is not something that happens overnight. We are taking good speakers, good managers, and making them leaders. Now, I want to talk about a radical concept of leadership here. What we see in Africa is the traditional model of leadership, which has got an apex. And right there at the top is the leader taking all the glory, basking in glory, and he is saying, I have made it, right? But that's the wrong concept of leadership if we want Africa to change. We need to turn this hierarchy upside down so that the apex becomes the tip that is in the ground. So that the leader is one who is able to carry people on his shoulders so that they can become taller than him. And as they are carrying they're being carried on his shoulders, they carry other people on their shoulders and more people on their shoulders. I am talking about servant leadership. If there was a school where we could start teaching our leaders to be servants of the people because they're civil servants, they claim to be civil servants who are not servants at all. A servant works for the welfare of the nation. But the last time I checked, most of them, they were working for making their own pockets fatter and fatter. So imagine if we could invert this leadership structure. Now imagine there's a tree of apples or oranges or whatever fruit is in West Africa. Because oranges are foreign to Africa, right? Whatever fruit is there. And you've got so many hands up there picking fruit at the top. How much fruit will be trickling down? The guy at the bottom doesn't have enough hands to catch the fruit that is falling from the top. But the traditional approach, they have one leader picking all the fruit there, all the glory, and then whatever he cannot hold trickles down. That's sad for Africa. We can only start trusting our leaders if they choose to become truly servant leaders. And leadership is not something that comes from the ballot. No, that's the managerial position that comes from the ballot. We are legitimizing managers, then we call them leaders. And that's a problem already. How do I become a leader simply because of a smart mouth when I have failed to lead the local community in the village? Where does change start? We talk about grassroots change, but we talk about no change at the top. We want to keep the status quo. Power should be at the top. I am saying if power is going to be rightfully at the top, then let's have all the people at the top and the leaders who are the servants at the bottom so that they can feel our power because they are creating a powerful people in us. That's my idea of trustworthy leadership. People who glory in creating more leaders than themselves, better leaders than themselves. People who are prepared to say, you are brighter, you are smarter than me. It's time for you to take over and run with the battle. Goodwill Jonathan. His name, just his name, goodwill. Where is the goodwill of our leadership if they are going to repress us? Where is the goodwill of our leadership if they are afraid to walk in the streets and greet everybody like Nelson Mandela did? A leadership that still craves to be protected is a repressive leadership because it has got more self-interest than people interest. Now, perhaps I'll not get another shot here. Let me just say this. We have been backing a very good tree, but the wrong tree. An African renaissance is only a renaissance if the individual component that makes Africa decides to have a rebirth. If we can have in our institutions education that doesn't glorify Western degrees, doctorates. Although they are called doctors, but when I was growing up, I thought a doctor is someone who treats a disease. But these are doctors who are so narrow-minded, so specific, when they are dealing with a world that is not specific at all. How do we educate people in order to make them narrow? Is it not that we should be educating people to make them broad? And the education in Africa makes us even so narrow so that those in the Francophone world will glorify French and the English. Ex-colonies of England will glorify English. And if we cannot be united even on foreign languages, how much more do we hope to be united in our own languages, let alone our own culture? This is a revolution that doesn't need guns. This is a revolution that starts with education. And education is not what we are getting in our schools. Education is what we can start giving our children at home. Now, in Africa, we use it to beat our children because it's also biblical. Spare the rod, ruin the child. But Western democracy, Western education says you cannot touch your child. You cannot correct your child. In other words, the child should be worse than the father. No wonder the leaders that we are creating are going to be much more corrupt than this generation of leaders that we have, because we cannot control our own children, even educationally. We are being set up for failure, not by the global system, not by democracy, but by a small world elite who will teach their own children real values and through capital destroy everybody else and subjugate. They are not subordinating us. They are subjugating our minds. And we need to put that to a stop and start in our houses.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Look, we have some speakers at times and you start feeling guilty for even having to step in to stop them. Or having to stop the session itself, because it's I really want to thank you for this session. It's been a very, very fantastic session. You've been one thing I became convinced about just the first time of having any interaction with you was the depth of your of your thoughts, of the thought process about the things that matter to you. At times, look, some of us, we have rhetorics. They're rhetorics, but when you scratch, just scratch a little under the surface, you just find emptiness there. You find there's really no substance to what you see at the surface. But in your own case, I can say that not because you're here, but and that's one of the reasons why we made that effort to bring you here today. And I really want to appreciate you. On behalf of this organization, I want to say a very, very big thank you. I want to thank all those who have followed us online. We've had a very good followership on social media today. The metrics are fantastic, and we still have people watching even right now. Usually when it's slightly past the time, you see a bit of drop-off, but we still have quite a few people, and which shows that they're magnetized by the topic for discussion today. And we've been discussing African Renaissance. We've been examining different aspects of it, and of course, our brother has actually given us the concept of Africanism, not of color, not of geographical origin, but in terms of our beliefs, in terms of our cultures, our values, which I subscribe to wholeheartedly. Perhaps the only area of divergence all through this is the strongman thing, and we said, those of us who have nations in Africa who have suffered from the strong man. In fact, by the time they are strong, they won't even wait for the man to be put at the back before running. So that's why implied we actually advocate institutions rather than the strong man, because the strong man can start out very good, just like the strong man in I keep going back to Uganda again. You know what happened? And of course, the African leader was Kamuzu Banda. Which one of them who dreamt? The strong man who dreamt that his vice plotted a coup against him. He saw it in his dream and woke up and arrested he got his deputy arrested and some other people because in his dream, they plotted a coup. One, let's even assume, that it was true that he dreamt, but only you can relay your dream. There's no witness to your dream. So it is what you say, it is just your word. And of course, the elderly man, the former president life president of Côte d'Ivoire, of the Ivory Coast, the man who said, the man from Yamoussoukro who said, a leader you do not know your successor. That, so that means it is a life thing. He would die there, and he actually died in office. There's so many of them, so many people like that. And that is why the concept of the strong man is and of course, we know what happened between this same Museveni and, Milton Obote. If you Obote me or Museveni, and of course, Samuel Doe in Liberia. We cannot forget the man who sat there while the Civil War consumed the country, while Yomi Johnson and Charles Taylor. It took the two of them to actually get the man out of the way, and then that situation brought forth another strong man in the form of of Charles Taylor, because Charles Taylor wanted to be the one to actually get rid of Samuel Doe, but because it was Yomi Johnson that did it, Yomi Johnson had to flee, and then you saw the strong man.
Convener, sir, can you unmute another device?
I apologize there. I lost I lost signal via that link, so I'm happy to come in via another link. So sorry. I just spoke on. I didn't even realize that my device was already gone. So basically, we just want a situation whereby it will be about the people and not about it will be about the institution and not about the enablers of that institution in terms of the politicians. We want to thank you because it's been you've enriched us so much. You've enlightened us in so many areas. You've brought new dimensions into this key issue of Africanism. And I hope you actually have a book on this subject, because if you do not, you're doing a grave injustice to those who can actually benefit from your knowledge. You need to, because I know you're from the academic background, you're a conference speaker, you're a motivational person, but this is very, very important. The concept of this Africanism is something we need to put out there for our people. So, ladies and gentlemen, our guest tonight has been Mr. Forward Makwavarara, who is a former lecturer at the International University of Management, Windhoek in Namibia. He is currently managing director of Mago Training and Technology, which is based in Namibia. Of course, he's a leadership training and empowerment specialist. Ladies and gentlemen, I commend him to you. And I can assure you, those of you already saying you want him back, by the grace of God, subject to his availability and subject to our own calendar, we'll be looking to bring him back sometime in the month of November, by God's grace. So, in the absence of our Secretary, can I invite our Deputy Secretary General to Comrade Kenny to actually give the vote of thanks on our behalf? Kenny, just unmute yourself. Okay, we're not getting audio from that background. Okay, let me go, Comrade Lukman, if you just want to give the vote of thanks on our behalf.
Yeah, thank you very much, sir. We really appreciate you. I'll be looking forward to seeing you once again, to hear from you by November, because I came late today. With that little, I really enjoy your message. I know you have a lot. You still have a lot in you to dish out for us. And I'll be waiting for that day to get it. Thank you. God bless you. God bless everybody that have been part of us today. I hope we can start in our own way, how we can sensitize people so that we can have a new and better Africa. Thank you. God bless you. God bless our convener. God bless everybody. Have a nice night.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much, Ms. Bosse Dara. Thank you so much, Comrade Kenny. Thank you so much, Oladaya Falabi. Thank you so much, Ms. Olabinton. Thank you so much, everybody that has joined. We had about 24 members at the points in the online panel tonight. It's been a fantastic time, and I apologize to all of you who wanted to ask questions that we could not take. Look, we've already gone beyond our time. So, 1 minute, Mr. Makwavarara, anything you want to say before we close it? In just 1 minute.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed being here, standing on my toes to answer questions. But yeah, I'm proud to be African. To quote just one line from Thabo Mbeki, I am African. And I just want to say this, I will be truly African because we have become Africans. I don't want to be a lone voice that will call himself an African. I want to be an African because we are Africans. Thank you for having me here. And let's go out there and be truly African, starting with the herbs. Let's go and reclaim our heritage, our African knowledge. we will not suffer the diseases of Europe, because they are European, they are not African. Why don't we suffer from African diseases and solve them with African solutions? Laboratories with African medicine, manned by African professionals, doing African research, which is world-class, because as Africans, we have a world-class mind, and let's not waste it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you. Thank you to all those who joined us from, I noticed a few people joined us all the way from Namibia as well, where our appreciation to everybody. And we had a few comments, a few hits on the YouTube from Shama Shah. We had quite a few people from Namibia to pinging us here and there. I'm so sorry. I do apologize. The questions that you posed, that I could not put them to him because our time just did not do justice to what we wanted to discuss today. But like I said, we'll be bringing him back in November by God's grace. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a fantastic week ahead. God bless you.